Today on the channel, the Get to Know Me tag. Hello everyone, my name is Misty Nicole with thelady-prefers-to-save.com, and today I am bringing you the Get to Know Me tag, 30 questions all about me, my past, my perspective, and my future endeavors. So before I get started, I just want to share that I originally saw this tag on Christopher Cupcake's channel, and I will link his channel below. I will also be mentioning some of my favorite YouTubers later in this video, and I will link all of their channels below as well. If you see this tag, please feel free to tag yourself in. And with that said, let's get started. The first question in the tag is, was I named after anyone? And yes, I was raised Roman Catholic, and so my first name, Margaret, was in honor of Saint Margaret. She actually was the patron saint of gypsies, tramps, and thieves. Oh. And so I have the wonderful distinction of that. She was also the patron who came as an apparition to Joan of Arc during her campaigns in France, and on the battlefield, Joan was said to have heard St. Margaret tell her that a woman can lead the people of France to freedom, and so she tells this later and recants it in her court testimony that St. Margaret led her and the people of France to freedom. Also, St. Margaret was referenced by Anne Hutchinson 3 centuries later in New England and said that a woman can hear the word of God and can pray directly on her own behalf. And so my uncle, in choosing Margaret, thought that a woman who can lead her own way and her own destiny was a good name for a kiddo. And then my two middle names, which are Misty and Nicole, come from two other sources. First, the Dorothy Moore song, Misty Blue, my uncle was a huge fan of, and so there's Misty. And then Nicole, which comes from the Greek for victory for the people, is also the name of a famed Greek orator, and so my uncle thought that I should be someone who was, I guess, in line with gypsies, tramps, thieves, politicians, and speakers. The second question in the tag is, when is the last time you cried? And that's a little difficult for me because I don't cry that often. It's not my go-to emotional defense. I'm more of the type of person, if I get upset, I tend to walk away or to be very quiet and self-reflective. And so I'm not a crier. I'm someone who likes to verbalize what I'm going through, right or wrong. And so it takes something huge and traumatic for me to cry. I also think that I had a lot of things go on in adolescence, and so I think I've shed more than enough tears for a lifetime. And so now I try to focus on the happy and the joy and not so much that. And the third question is, do you have kids? Yes, I have a daughter, and her name is Whimsy, because who doesn't need a little whimsy in your life? I currently am not going to say that I won't naturally have any more children, although that's been very, very difficult for me. But I do plan to adopt or foster children in the future because both my husband and I were adopted, and that's a huge thing for us, and it is something that's in my heart, and we would definitely like to do it in the future. The fourth question is, if you were another person, would you be a friend of yourself? I like to think so. I am very all in with my friends. I don't have that many people that I consider close friends, and so the friends that I've had for many, many years, I keep them very close. I touch base all the time. If I'm invested with people, I like to be all in. The fifth question is, do I use sarcasm a lot? Probably more than I should. It's something that I'm definitely working on. I think the internet and the ambiguity of the internet kind of gives me license to say things that I want to say sometimes, especially in political matters. A lot of things just don't come across perhaps the way you want to, and sometimes I second guess what I say because I don't want to offend other people. But generally I mean everything that I say, and so sometimes I don't have the best delivery. The sixth question is, what's the first thing you notice about people? In terms of natural ability, I would say I notice how people speak. I listen to verbal patterns and accents, and I enjoy listening to learned people. I like being around people I can learn something from. In terms of external or appearance, I tend to notice shoes. I think shoes really say a lot about a person. They can tell you where someone's been, where they're going, what their occupation is, and what their attitudes towards life are. The seventh question is, what is your eye color? blue. 8th question is, do I like movies with happy endings or scary movies? You know, there's a lot of romantic comedies that I absolutely adore, but they can be kind of cliche. So I'm gonna go with horror with a caveat. I'm not into like snuff films or like really gory films that are trying to teach you some kind of displaced social moral. Not really into that. I do like older movies. I love things like old Vincent Price movies and Hitchcock movies where there's a little bit of gore, but it's more about the suspense. The 8th question is, what are my favorite smells? Well, in terms of perfumes, I love, love, love Fragonard, which if you're not familiar with, it is like the famous artist, a member of his family. I want to say a great niece started a perfumery, which is in France and Marseille and Grasse, and I order those, and I absolutely love their French musk. If I could like douse the furniture and my husband and the child and the dogs, I probably would. In terms of candles, I love kind of foodie scents, especially scents in the fall, like pralines and pecans and marshmallows and apples and all those fun things. And I also love essential oils, and I tend to go for things like sandalwood or lavender or something with a little bit more like oomph to it. 10th question is, where is the furthest from home you've ever been? And for me, I have been to several different countries, and so let's see, the farthest I've probably been from home was Malaysia, or when I missioned in Africa, in Kenya and in South Africa. So that would probably be the farthest. 11 is, do I have any special talents? Well, other than being a savvy saver, I will say that I'm pretty good at painting. I also did my internship for my master's degree, and in my undergraduate degree when I studied abroad was in art history, so I am kind of in tune with fixing art. I had a job while I was in college. One of my jobs while I was in college was a framer for an art gallery, so I kind of like framing art. That's pretty cool. I also am pretty good at cleaning and organizing and being minimal, if that's a talent. I also like to think I'm a pretty good writer. And when I was in high school, I was on our student paper as I was in college. And then when I started my graduate level classes, I started working towards, adding articles to our campus gazettes and for publications. And when I studied abroad, I actually had 2 novellas published. So I'd like to say a little bit of writing, maybe. And aside from that, I'm pretty good at being me. So if that's a talent, I'm like totally acing that one. Question 12 is, where was I born? I was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey. 13 is, what are my hobbies? Well, I have a few of them. I love reading. I'm a huge bibliophile. I am a huge francophile. I love all things France, and if I have a little bit of downtime, one of my shows is Versailles. I absolutely love all things Louis XIV. That's pretty cool, in the Baroque period. I also really enjoy listening to podcasts and kind of training as I'm starting up my podcast. I also enjoy in the spring oil painting. But that's kind of precarious because there's only certain months of the year in the Deep South I can really do it, because it takes months and months for it to cure and dry. So, from April to say mid-June, I like to paint. I like charcoal sketching. I also love things like restoring furniture, making like DIY chalk paint and fixing up dressers or furniture that you can find for free on the side of the road. That's always been something I really enjoy doing. I also have really enjoyed, as of late, getting back into puzzle making. I also love recipe creation. That's something that I really, really enjoy. I also like listening to records with my husband. He has a huge vinyl collection, and so it's kind of neat to go back and hear the old non-digital, things, and the crackling of the records I think is pretty cool, especially on his 45s. I also have a huge, I heart them for old musicals, Broadway, off-Broadway. I'm still pretty old school, thoroughly modern Millie, the Fantastics, love them. Question 14, do you have any pets? Yep, I got a bunch of them. Let's see from the top. I have 3 dogs. My oldest dog is named Harley, and he was adopted because his owners could not take care of him and wanted to put him to sleep to not have the burden of having Harley. And so we took him in. He was not planned. It's just something that kind of happened. And he is now 13 and a Chihuahua, so he's pretty old. He spends most of his time sleeping, so Harley kind of lives on the couch. And I also have Roxy. Roxy was my husband's. He was a gift from my mother-in-law because she had puppies with her Westies, and so my husband took the runt. And Roxy is 10 this year. She'll be 10. And so we have her. And then there's my, my baby, my favorite child, which is Sassy, my Shih Tzu, and she is just everything. Love her to pieces. She's turning 8 this year. She was also adopted, and the funny thing about Sassy, she was put up for adoption because her original dog family, as it were, no longer wanted her because she could not be seen in shows because her front right paw is 1/8 of a centimeter too short. And so since they could not make money or breed her, she was given away for adoption. So that is why she probably has a very special place in my heart. She's a little bit quirky and she's lovable and precocious and love her to pieces. Then we have our cats, and we have my husband's cat. Actually, before we got married, when he was out of the Army, he adopted a Bombay cat named Shadow, and at the time Shadow was 7 or 8, and now Shadow just turned, by our calculations, 17. He is ancient, like dust ancient. And then we have our American Shorthair, who was also an adopted kitten from a local rescue to keep Shadow company, and his name is Boo Radley because To Kill a Mockingbird, love it. And so I have Mr. Boo Boo, and so those are my fuzzies. Question 15, do you have any siblings? No, I didn't grow up with any siblings. I later found out that I have a biological half-sister. She and I did not grow up together, and I don't really know much about her. Question 16, what did you want to be when you grew up? When I was growing up, I wanted to be one of 3 things. I wanted to be a primatologist like Jane Goodall, or a famous painter like Pablo Picasso, or a lawyer like Johnny Cochran. 17, who was your first best friend? My first best friends were, of course, my Uncle Danny and my grandmother, Carolyn, and they were my rocks. I would say I was always a little bit closer to my uncle because my grandmother worked and had many hats and did so many things in our community that she wasn't as home as often. But I learned probably the most from her, but I have the most memories from my uncle. Question 18, how tall am I? I am 5'7". Question 19 is, what was your funniest moment through school? And for me, that was probably in 8th grade taking AP biology, and I did not want to dissect a fetal pig, and so my teacher said that the only way that I would be able to get out of that is if I could somehow entertain her. And so to that challenge, Miss Worley gave me 5 minutes to come up with something, and at that point I got on top of my station in AP biology and recited the entire monologue from Norma Ray, and not only did I get out of cutting up that fetal pig, but I got an A on that assignment. Question 20, how many countries have you visited? To date, 21. Most were in Western Europe and in the Caribbean and Central America. I've also been to Kenya and Malaysia and South Africa. Places I would like to go include a lot more travel to Southeast Asia, especially now that I'm eating a plant-based diet. I would love to go to Thailand and to Laos, and I have always wanted to go to India, and I would always have wanted to go to Cambodia to see Angkor Wat. Question 21, what were your favorite and least favorite subjects in school? For me, my favorite subjects in school were English, especially literature. I also was a huge history buff and still am. I also enjoyed science, particularly physical science and physics and ecology. I also really enjoyed going to theater and in art school because it was a performing arts school that was divided up between technical theater and lighting and international baccalaureate theater techniques. I even took in college a kabuki theater course, so I always enjoyed that. And then my least favorite was still part of kind of my favorite, which was algebra. I just never really saw a purpose to it. Question 21, what is your favorite drink, animal, and perfume? My favorite drink is coffee, particularly a latte or say a ciao bello, which is a really strong espresso with gelato on top. I also really enjoy maple lattes too, so that's another one. My favorite animal, I have a couple. I really like Indian elephants. I just think they are so cute. I also am a huge fan of tigers, particularly Siberian tigers. And my other animal, which has kind of a funny story, would be what we like to call the black and white striped horse. And the reason I like this is because when I was in Africa, I normally called them zebras. And then I was corrected on several occasions by locals who informed me that they are actually supposed to be pronounced like the name Deborah, so zebra. And so one of the things in the back of my head, like if I stump my finger or something like that happens, instead of using a profanity, I go zebra. So that's my favorite animal. Question 23 is, what would you or have you named your children? And I initially had a list of names and I went first with Whimsy, and then my second child who passed away was named Lucy. And some more names on my list include Stevie Ray. I've always been particularly fond of Stevie Ray. I just always enjoyed that name. Madison was a good one. I've always been very fond of Jude. And so I guess those are my names. 24, what sports do you play or have played? I played tennis in high school. Question 25, who are some of your favorite YouTubers? And I'm just going to quickly look over my subscription list. And I love Christopher Cupcake. He is amazing. He is a former hairstylist and event planner and esthetician, and I love his perspective on just things going on in his life. I love that he is plant-based and is a Pilates instructor. I also love that he is a bibliophile and a fellow Francophile, and he just has an awesome spirit about him, and I really enjoy his videos. I also am a huge fan of Jenny Mustard. She is a pretty big YouTuber and a minimalist, and she and her significant other, David, are just really funny and witty Scandinavian couple, and I enjoy. Question number 26 is, how many girlfriends or boyfriends have you had? And for me, that is a very small number. I've actually had 4, and the 4th I married. The 7th question was, what was my favorite memory from childhood? One of my favorite memories from childhood were my birthdays, because they were a who's who of all of my uncle and grandmother's friends. I had a pretty sheltered upbringing. It was that way purposed. I lived in a very unconventional home, and because of the minority status of one of my parents, there was a lot of stigma placed on our family. Also, I didn't know this until many years later. The woman who I regarded as my mother was actually my grandmother, and my mother had been a teen parent. And so I think a lot of the decisions they made, unbeknownst to me, were based on the fact that they had grown up very poor and had dealt with a lot of things and in life. And so birthdays were a great time. It was a special time. They always started with my uncle telling me about how he had enjoyed the day that I was born and how, that was the icing on the cake for him, and every other day was great thereafter. And I got to see their friends, and people would bring covered food dishes that lived in our neighborhood, and we lived in a very diverse neighborhood, so everything from Jamaican and Haitian food to kosher dishes. We lived next door to a rabbi. We had some of my uncle's friends who would come dressed up as some of my favorite Hollywood stars, as it were, and so it was just an absolutely magical time, and every year was a little bit better. I don't think they ever spent a whole lot of money, but it was important, and it was coordinated, and it was a community effort, and it was nice to know that you were appreciated simply because of your personhood. And so for me, I grew up thinking that birthdays were almost national holidays. Question 28, how would you describe your fashion sense? And I would say my current fashion sense is very relaxed. I believe in dressing for your vocation in life, and so I don't really see the point of putting on extreme glam makeup and hair every day to be at home. It kind of seems like a waste of time and resource. Question 29 is, what phone do you have? I currently have an iPhone 7 Plus, but I am eligible for an upgrade. My husband has an iPhone 8 Plus, and I originally was going to get the iPhone 10, but I read last month that they are being discontinued because of sales and that new phones are coming out this October. So if anybody has a suggestion on that, I would definitely love to hear it. In question 30, what is one of your bad habits? One of my worst habits is I get turned off by what people say. In so much as if I listen to people and it is taking them way too long to reiterate what I want to hear, I'm either thinking about something else in my head or have cut them off in mid-sentence and have moved on to something else. And I notice I do that a lot with my husband, and he is so gracious and doesn't correct me on that, but I'm sure as an educator, he just wants to wring my neck for doing it. Those were my 30 questions for the Get to Know Me tag. And again, I will list all those favorite YouTubers in the description bar below, as well as Christopher Cupcakes, where I originally solved this tag. I also believe I may have seen Melissa from the House of Plaid Fuzz earlier this year do the same tag as well, I think. But in any event, if you liked this tag, definitely leave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future updates. And definitely tag yourself in. And if you do, please come back to this video and leave me a comment, because I would definitely love to check out your tag and get to know you better as well. Also, be sure to check out all those influencers that I am listing below, because their channels deserve love and they're all amazing human beings, and their videos help to make me a more inspired and better person, and it is worth your time to check them out. It is a privilege to subscribe to them, and I'm sure you will feel the same. With that said, be sure to, again, and as always, please be kind to yourself and to others, and have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks so much for watching.